How do you describe the difference between a financial counselor and a financial planner?
Yeah, I get this question a lot because I got my accredited financial counselor Canada certification back in 2018, and I am still one of the few people who have that designation and is like an independent practitioner. And the reason I got that back then is I actually had a friend from the US. It started in the US, and she did financial coaching, and she's like, this is a program you should look into. It won't take you long compared to like going for the full CFP, which will take you a little while. And I'm like, okay, great. I wanted to be a financial educator and again get into coaching, working with individuals one on one, but I wanted some sort of credential. I didn't just want it. There was a lot of, at the time, a lot of coaches who didn't have any kind of background or any kind of credential. So I wanted to kind of set myself apart. So did that program, took about a year, and it was such a great experience. And now I'm a big advocate, especially for other financial content creators and educators that want to do coaching or offer services. I'm like, you should get your AFCC if you're in Canada, because it really is kind of like financial planning light. It's really for people if you want to help people with their budgets, cash flow, debt repayment, things like that. Nothing super intensive or, something that you would need like a QAFP or a CFP to get, which I'm actually hoping to get my QAFP this fall. The book has really kind of taken 2 years out of that, but I'm hopeful that I can actually finally take the exam. But it was a really great entry point into how do I learn some essential things to help other people in kind of a shorter amount of time, and also provide a service that is a little bit more cost effective for certain people who they're like, I just want help with my budget, or I just need someone to help me with a debt repayment plan. And I think the reason a lot of people don't know too much about the AFCC is because traditionally it was just you would just need to get that designation if you want to be a credit counselor, work for an agency or a nonprofit. I never wanted to do that. And so, yeah, when I got the designation, I was like one of the few people who got it just to work independently. But it's a great program for anyone who wants to even just like educate themselves. There's some really great textbooks and, challenge yourself just to learn a little bit more about financial, personal finance in Canada.
Hmm. And so is it like financial planning light, or is there more of a behavioral component to it?
There is like the counseling behavior component. That's like the program has obviously changed since I took it so many years ago. At the time, it was kind of two halves. The first portion, and there was an exam that went with that, was more like these are all the kind of the key things you need to know about financial planning. The second part was more the counseling behavior, how to work with the client, how to listen, active listening, how to discern what they're saying without when they're not maybe using just like their body language or their tone, and really the counseling component, which I loved because previous to that, I only really had experience working with professionals, at the bank and advisor, and they were doing none of the things that I was learning. I'm like, oh man, everyone should take this program to learn how to actually talk to their clients properly, actually listen to what they're saying, pick up on cues when they're uncomfortable or they said they understand. And I know they don't because of their body language. And so that was really also really insightful just to learn how to counsel, because that obviously informed kind of what I was able to do with clients one-on-one and then effectively kind of write about my book.
Hmm. Yeah, that is really interesting. That's kind of what I picked up on when I looked at their website. That
Hmm.
the counseling component is the part that I think is really interesting. When you think about your practice, how much of it do you think is like financial planning or light financial planning
Hmm.
versus the financial counseling?
Yeah, I mean, maybe 50-50. Most people come to me because they have a financial problem. But then when we
Hmm.
do a little digging, ask some questions about their background and their relationship with money, it becomes really clear like, okay, we have some things to maybe figure out first before we make a budget, because you've made a million budgets and you've never been able to stick to one.
Hmm.
There's got to be a reason behind that. It's not the system, it's not the budget, it's something else. You just, you keep on kind of getting in your own way, or you keep, self-sabotaging yourself. So we need to kind of address some of these things. And obviously there's a certain point where you're like, well, I am not a therapist. So at a certain point, you're like, I can recommend some
Hmm.
people or some other professionals to help you. I've done that with a number of people, especially too, if you start noticing, oh, there actually may be an element of like financial abuse with their partner, or they're in a very unhealthy relationship or situation that is having a huge impact on their finances, but they would have never even realized this. I have this one memory of working with a woman where her partner is the one who suggested that she work with me. And as we worked together, it was very clear that I'm like, there's something else going on. Unfortunately, there's sometimes, sometimes they're open to hearing that maybe you want to kind of go down this route. At that point, she wasn't really ready, so we only did one session and tried to, provide some resources. But she really thought it was just a money problem. Like, it's so not. There's so many other things going on. So you can only kind of do what you can do. But hopefully, I'm hopeful that maybe something kind of stuck in her mind, and she's like, maybe down the road she'll be open to it. But that's the exciting part, because honestly, numbers don't excite me, not that much sometimes, because you're trying to crack the code or trying to find the solution to the problem. But it's more exciting really getting your clients to have that aha moment, like, oh, maybe that's why I'm doing that. And you're like, yeah, yeah, it is.
Now, Jessica, you're specifically trained in financial counseling. Most of us as advisors, planners are not. We shouldn't pretend to be counselors. But what are some simple ways that, the average advisor without that specific training can just learn to become more sensitive to their clients' non-financial needs?
Well, I do found, because I recently did the QAFP professional education program, and I feel like they are actually starting to integrate a little bit more of this education into the program, because they clearly realize this is really important. So that's great. But all it really is, it's nothing crazy. It's really just about listening and taking notes. And what I find most advisors and planners often do is they feel like I have to provide the answers and the solutions. And so they take up the whole time talking instead of actually say less, because that's how you really learn more about your client and find out, oh, they said that they wanted a plan that looks like this. They actually need this, or they actually want this, but they just don't know how to ask for it. So really, it just comes down to really listening with all the ways that you can listen. Again, it's like the looking at them, the visual component, really listening to the tone and the words that they're choosing. And also too, just seeing, especially if you're working with a couple, seeing if we work with them when they're both there, is there a difference when I just have them on an individual basis? And you can learn a lot sometimes when they don't feel comfortable talking about something with their partner in the room. So really just picking up on these things and then putting all that information together to make a more cohesive financial plan and strategy for how to reach their goals.
All right, this question comes from me reading your book. What is the missing puzzle in the personal finance space? Missing piece of the puzzle in the personal finance space.
I think I wrote in the book empathy.
That is what you wrote, yeah.
That's the answer. Oh my gosh, empathy. Now, I'm seeing a lot more of it now, which I'm so thankful for. A lot of people are picking up on that. We need to be more understanding and empathetic. But I will say the reason I wrote that is because when I started my personal finance journey and, reading Dan's blog and learning all this stuff. And I think the reason I like Dan so much is he did seem always very empathetic. Is a lot of the books and information out there was very judgmental and very shame-based and very much, blamed. If you're in a situation that's not good financially, you got yourself there and you should feel bad about it, and kind of that tough love. And that worked for me for a while until it really actually did a lot of damage. And so I had to do a lot of work to undo that damage. And also then you start becoming judgmental on people, like, oh, well, that person is in that situation because they did this and this and this. That may not be the case. You don't know the whole story, and everyone comes from a different environment or starting place. And so for me, and when I do, talk with people, whether it's just through Instagram DMs or they're a client, they are just they're being vulnerable with you, and you need to be really aware that you have a responsibility to be very caring and understanding and meet them where they are instead of blaming them for, "Hey, you should be somewhere else." And so for me, that's where I always want to be, because there's still a lot of judgment and shame and harshness in the financial sector. And that really doesn't work for most people. They'll, feel de-incentivized to start, like, they'll think that I'm too stupid for this. I can't possibly learn this on my own. This is too complex. I'm just going to, leave the table instead of lean in and really, learn the skills that I don't have and learn the information that I don't have so I can improve my situation. So for me, I want to be in an inviting, you know, and safe place for people, because I didn't always necessarily feel like I had that. And I really wish I would, because I bet I would have been a little bit more advanced in certain respects. Like I probably wouldn't have waited so long to learn about investing because honestly, I thought I can't learn this stuff. This is too complex because
Hmm.
everyone else is telling me it's too hard for me because I'm a woman, I'm young, I'm all of these things. And then when I kind of pushed past that, I'm like, no, I'm going to learn it anyway. I realized, oh, actually, anyone can learn this stuff. It's just a skill.
Hmm.
It's like anything. Anyone can learn to cook, but I never felt like welcomed. And so I want to, yeah, start kind of that change. Well, not start the change, but be part of that change, like so many other people in the space.
Can you talk a little bit about how shame affects people's financial decisions?
Oh yeah, that's like the number one feeling when I talk to people when I was doing research for this book and doing some surveys and asking people, how does money make you feel? Shame was number one. That was also my
Hmm.
answer when I really did some introspection. Shame is such a powerful feeling because it can, just like I kind of said, it take you out of the equation. You're like, I shouldn't even be here. I'm so sorry. I can't believe I thought I could build wealth or I can improve my financial situation. Shame is to it's meant to isolate you and prevent you from any kind of personal or financial growth. And until you understand that, and then try to do the work to rectify that, to make sure that shame, it has its place. It's a natural feeling, and it is helpful. There's some things that we should feel shame about so we don't repeat it because it's maybe not a good behavior, but we shouldn't just feel ashamed completely when it comes to our money, because that's when you stop looking at your bank accounts. That's when you're like, I'm not even going to invest, or I don't know what to do, or I'm going to hand over everything to this financial advisor who, was a suggestion from a friend of a friend, but I have no idea what they're doing. And you should absolutely know what they're doing, but you feel ashamed to ask the questions because you feel stupid. So there's all these things that I can do a lot of, again, damage to you. And we need to have a healthy relationship with money, because money shouldn't feel like a big, monster or ogre that is really scary. It's not good or bad. It's just a tool. And you should feel that you're in control of it, not the reverse. And that's really what I'm trying to get across in the book, is that no, you are in control of money. Let's get that straight first.
Hmm. When you think about money related shame, what are some of the common sources?
Oh, well, usually goes back to childhood. So part of it is, I know this is probably going to be a future question about the first money memory, but it's kind of a good entry point. A lot of our big feelings about money start in childhood with our kind of first memory of money, which is usually or the first impactful experience that we've had with money. And so if for me, my story had a connection to shame. I stole something I shouldn't have. I was ashamed for doing that, and also felt like I put shame on my family. That feeling has then, it took a hold on me and did not let go until I started doing some self work and some therapy. And I think a lot of people I talk to, when they have, feelings of like anxiety or shame or envy or whatever the case connected to money, and that's like the biggest feeling, it usually is because it started really young and because of a life experience. And it also could have just been like, how was money talked about in your upbringing by your caregivers, by your parents? What was the tone? And if shame, blame, anxiety, envy, those kind of things were always around when money was around, that's your representation, that's your perspective on money. And so that's going to be really hard until you really understand, oh, that's where that came from. You're going to carry that feeling with you for years. And I say that as someone who's, I call myself a money expert, because I've been doing media and stuff for years, and I thought I had it all together until I started really looking to my own relationship with money. I'm like, oh my God, this is really toxic. I can't believe I didn't notice this. I've been giving people, advice for years, and I didn't even realize this is where I was at with money. This is not how I want to continue living either.
Hmm. How important is people's relative financial standing, like relative to people around them, to the relationship that they have with money?
Oh yeah, I mean that has a big impact. If you're with, and it's not even so much that if you're with people in a certain income bracket, that can have an impact. But I'd say even more so is how they view money.
Hmm.
If you are surrounded by people that are very optimistic about opportunities, and if you have a setback, that's okay. We can get back from that and get back on track. That's going to obviously influence you to be like, oh yeah, okay, there's a lot of opportunities, there's a lot of freedoms, there's a lot more hope here. But if you're in an environment where there's a lot of negativity around money. Like, oh, I wish I had better luck. I wish I was born into wealth. I wish the government this, whatever, taxes, this, that. Then you're going to have a perspective of, well, I'm in this situation, can't change it because everyone else in my environment is in the same spot. So this is just how it is. And so where's the motivation to do something about it? So for me, I like to surround myself, not even just like for in the financial space, but in every area of my life. I want to be around people who are motivated and want to continue learning and read a lot of books and are just excited about life and the possibility of what could happen. And I have been in environments with, groups of friends where it's been the opposite. And that's usually been the lowest points in my life because they kind of just drag you down. But I will say there's obviously a component if you are hanging out with people, I think in your own income bracket, I think there's some stats that say you're going to be probably happier than if you are the lowest income bracket in your friend group and everyone earns more. I've been in those situations. Doesn't feel nice. You feel like the poor one, even if you're like, actually, I'm making a pretty, median salary. Or even too, there's feelings you can have if you're the one who earns the most in your group. You may feel kind of, again, ashamed because you're like, well, I don't want to make them feel bad because they earn less. And I don't want them to know how much I earn and they judge me for it. Or the reverse of like, what if they keep asking me for money or whatever? So in general, we have an easier time just being satisfied with our financial standing when we're around people in similar financial standings.
I really enjoyed the discussion that you had in the book about privilege and
Yeah.
why those of us who've enjoyed privilege are so loath to acknowledge it. And
Yeah.
what I really liked was one of the experts that you quoted made this really insightful comment by saying that acknowledging that you have privilege doesn't erase what you've achieved, it contextualizes it, which I think
Yeah.
is a really great way of saying it. So how is that related to our relationship with wealth? How is this idea of recognizing or failing to recognize privilege related to the way you view your own relative financial position?
Yeah, I feel like there's been a lot more discussions about privilege in the personal finance space. I'd say from 2020, that was a really big moment for those conversations, and they've continued, which I think is great. And even for me, I would have never thought I was someone who had privilege. But I'm like, well, I'm white. I came from a middle class family. Yeah, we didn't have that much money compared to others, but also we were never in poverty. I had a lot of opportunities because of how I grew up and where I was born in Canada and all these kinds of things. I have a lot of inherent privilege that made it easier for me to accomplish a lot in my life. And, for example, like I had the privilege of having a mom who was a career counselor in high school. So she helped me get into university. She like, this is, these are the applications, these are some scholarships you should sign up. That is a privilege. Whereas if someone, their parents are always working and they don't have any knowledge of this, it's going to be harder for them likely to get accepted into university and get those scholarships, which can have a huge impact on the rest of their life. And so there's so many different privileges that, I just gave like a short list in the book, but there's so many privileges that you may have that you did not earn that have helped you get to where you are today. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person for having privilege, but we do need to acknowledge it because it's never really been acknowledged historically. And we need to acknowledge it because that's the only way that we can start to then equalize things and really put a spotlight on what are some systems and things going on that are still keeping others down when they're working just as hard. They're doing all the things that we're doing, but they're still not getting to the same place I am. And it could be because of so many different elements. They're a person of color, they have a disability, they have all of these different things that, well, it's going to be a little bit harder. And it's crazy to think that a lot of the older traditional personal finance books do not mention it at all. They're just like, it's all about effort and motivation. You're like, this is one component, but it's not the full story. Because again, I have been in work environments where I worked twice as hard and a man gets promoted. And you're like, why? And it's because he may have a special relationship with the other male boss that he was just, oh yeah, we went to the same university. I want to promote that guy, and you're like, well, that's not fair. It isn't fair. So we need to acknowledge it so we can change these systems. And we can't change the systems unless we talk about the problems.
When you're working with a client who you can see is having their decisions affected by financial shame, how do you approach coaching them through that?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's about getting to the source of why do we feel like this, and how long has this lasted, and how has it manifested in other areas of your life, but also especially your finances, because it's not just like a feeling, it can prevent you from making certain transactions or taking certain risks or, reading certain books because you're like, I don't think I can even understand it. It might be too over my head. And so really getting to kind of the root of it and then seeing what kind of events maybe transpired because shame was there to kind of block you from moving forward and breaking that down and then start to rebuild. And what kind of life would you like? What kind of relationship with money would you prefer? Obviously, one with less shame, hopefully no shame. Well, we all need a little shame just to keep ourselves grounded a little bit. But yeah, really figuring out where did that all start and where would we prefer to go? And then what are some steps that we can start to write so we can start making those, taking those action steps so we can get to where we are. And it's going to be a long process and it's a practice. Like everything in the book that I talk about on these are all the problems here, the solutions. It's never a cure. It's always a practice. It'll take you years. I've been doing some podcasts over the past couple months and I'm like, I still bring up things that I do that I know I shouldn't be doing with my money. And it's because I'm human and I make mistakes and you need to forgive yourself and no one's perfect, especially me who wrote a book about this topic. I'm like, I still do these things. I still have these really, really weird money quirks and shame still rears its ugly head. And the best that I can do is acknowledge, oh, I see what's going on. And I don't want that to happen because I know what would happen if I just let it, have free reign. And what can I do instead? And try to slowly move into that direction. And the more you do it, the easier it gets.
How is guilt different from shame?
Yeah, I think a lot of people use guilt and shame interchangeably and also jealousy and envy. They're different things. Again, they're all natural feelings, so they're not bad. However, they can be bad or make you behave maybe not the best way. And shame is when you feel like something is fundamentally flawed with you. Like I'm a bad person. Guilt is really about an act or a behavior. So it's a little bit easier to understand and change. So I did a bad thing. So shame, that's why shame is so powerful and can be very damaging because when you think that, oh, so I'm just a bad person or I'm bad with money, you're making a statement that that is who I am. And a lot of people have this idea that people can't change. Whereas with guilt, you're like, I did a bad thing. I don't want to do that again because I felt really bad about it. And so guilt is really important because it prevents us from doing things that we shouldn't be doing. And it's a lot easier to rectify and to, ask for forgiveness or just not do it again in the future.
What's the difference between rational and irrational money guilt?
Oh, well, I mean, rational guilt is kind of like I mentioned, it's a good thing. It will prevent us from doing something that we really shouldn't be doing, such as, it could be like any kind of money mistake. You're like, oh, shouldn't have done that, such as, buying a hot stock you saw from some TikToker and you buy it and then you lose money. You're like, oh, I feel guilty about that. I really shouldn't have gambled with some of that money. I'm not going to do that again. That's a really good, important feeling to have. Remember that for the future. Irrational guilt is when you start taking over responsibility for something that you did that may not actually be your fault, or you shouldn't feel that bad about it. It's not that big of a deal. I see that a lot with clients who maybe they grew up in a household where they did have to take over responsibility for a lot of different things. And so everyone's problem is their problem or their fault. And that could be, gosh, anything. It could be like, say you bought a stock that you knew you probably shouldn't because you didn't do any research and you're just kind of leaning into the excitement online. You bought it, you lost some money. You should feel bad about that. Don't do it again. But if you're like, you can't let it go. And then you're just like, it just spirals. And then it's really hard to get out of that dark place. That's not where we want to be because that's not going to help you.
How do you see fear affecting the way that people approach their money?
A lot of people approach their money with fear. It's like I feel like especially right now with uncertain times, once again, we're always in uncertain times and fear is so present with people. They are terrified that the worst thing is going to happen when it usually doesn't. Something bad could happen, but usually not like the worst case scenario. Fear, similar to shame, can prevent you from doing anything different than you're currently doing, even if what you're doing right now is not working. And so that could be, again, like educating yourself, getting more information, taking risks that are calculated. And you know what? There's a very small downside. For example, I see a lot of people afraid to adjust their asset allocation, their portfolios to something more risky when they're like 25 and they're like in a 60-40 portfolio. I'm like, what are you doing? You're not a retiree. What's going on here? And they're just terrified of losing their money, likely because they had either a life experience that really scared them, or they saw someone close to them have that experience. They're like, well, I don't want to be them. I'm going to play it safe. And so fear has a really big presence in people's lives, but it's more, it can be dangerous. Again, fear is an important feeling. It helps keep us alive in lots of different life experiences. But when it comes to our money, you need to have some fear, because the people who are super fearless are the ones that take such big risks. And usually not, there's always a downside to that. And I see that with a lot of young investors, especially, like they're fearless, and it's because they've never experienced a repercussion, a negative outcome. Whereas, if you have experienced a negative outcome, you're like, oh, okay, lesson learned. We can take risk, but we need to understand, how much can we actually put into this potential an investment, or could we survive if it did like lose all its money. We just need to be more, yeah, rational and um aware of what we're doing.
Mentioned a minute ago that there's a difference between jealousy and envy. So you want to talk a
Hmm.
little bit about the difference and then how these affect our relationship with money.
Yeah, every day. Like, honestly, people just use the word jealousy. No one uses envy, maybe because it sounds like an old word. I don't
Yeah.
know. But no, so jealousy is when there's three parties. So there's like you, then there's someone else, and there's someone else getting in the way, who's maybe gonna, yeah, steal your boyfriend or something. So there's a third party who's making you jealous in that situation. There's always three parties. Envy is just you kind of envying or coveting someone else's life, their possessions, whatever. So it's just two parties. And that's usually more common than the jealousy situation. So most of us are, you know, online or just walking down the street, or out and about at a restaurant, and we are looking at what other people have, and it's very natural to feel envious. And again, envy is a very important feeling because it can be motivating to be like, hey, I want to actually upgrade my life. I want to do better because I see what this person has. So how can I maybe integrate some of the things that they're doing so I can improve my life? But where envy is kind of dangerous is when just you feel bad because you don't have what they have. And then you start blaming yourself for, oh, I should have done this. I should have done this. Or you want to take that person down, which is, we see that a lot in the comments online, where people are just super mean anonymously to people they don't know because they're envious, instead of maybe rethinking what should I do to improve my life, instead of be like, no, that person did this and that, they don't deserve that, they're a con artist, da, da, da. And you're like, we don't know any of these things.
Yeah, Dan is very wise. He is mostly off of social media now.
Oh,
I
I
don't even
wonder
know
what
what you
that
guys
life
are
is. I
talking
would
about.
love
Yeah.
that life. I would love to be offline. Unfortunately, I'm only online because of my business, but if I get to a point where I can retire, you'll never see me again.
Why are early money memories important for people to connect with?
Like I kind of mentioned, it's where our origin story with money starts. That is where the relationship really starts. And a lot of the like that experience, like the one I describe in the book, I was 4 years old and I remembered it. And I'm almost 40. And I'm like, wow, that certainly had an impact on me, and I of course told my mom. She's like, I don't remember any of that happening. I'm like, well, I sure do. And so I think a lot of us, during the book tour I've been on, I've been, talking about the first money memories, and a lot of people are coming up to me and sharing their first money memories. And it's incredible. These people are like, oh, I know it. Like they knew exactly what it was. Most people know exactly their first interaction with money. And sometimes it's a positive interaction, which, hey, that'll probably set you up on a really good relationship with money. But a lot of the people that come to me or read my book is because they don't have a good relationship with money and they want to figure out how can I fix that. With that, I always like to ask my hosts if they remember what their first money memory is. Do either of you? kind of have an idea? Or you're like, if not, that's okay. We can move on.
I can't remember what I had for breakfast, to be honest with you.
You can't
I think
remember what happened to you at 4 years old?
I think I had like my parents made me make a chart for chores or like tasks that I had to complete and I had to fill in these things on the chart to get a bike.
Oh, wow.
That was definitely one of them. And then another one was building a Lego vehicle with a magnet on it in the hopes of picking up change on the ground outside. It didn't
I
work.
love that. Well, those sound like pretty positive experiences with money. Do you feel like, Ben, you've had a pretty healthy relationship with money over your lifetime?
Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
I have. Yeah. I think I
Same
have.
with you, Dan. Maybe this is why you're in the line of work you are. You're like, no, actually, it's all been pretty good, and now I just want to continue helping other people have good relationships with
Yeah, I
money.
think that's it. Like, I mean, I was very fortunate to grow up, in a situation where I didn't have any of my needs unmet. Doesn't mean, we weren't wealthy, but I don't ever remember it being associated with sort of stress and anxiety. If my family experienced that, they did a pretty good job of shielding us from it.
Mm.
And I do remember, like, very early on, I think like a lot of kids of my generation, like, got jobs when we were teenagers and just kind of, learned to equate work with money and money with things, buying things that you wanted, saving up for things that you wanted. Yeah, and I think I've been able to take that kind of into this career as well, like that. It's not something that stresses me out a lot. And so hopefully I can impart a little bit of that calm to my clients.
You definitely have, yeah, you've always had, that's been part of your brand, Dan, is this nice calm, like everything's going to be fine, which is why I think a lot of people are attracted to you, and your advice is like, oh, Dan knows what's going on. Everything's going to be
Well,
fine. He
thanks.
says
Yeah,
so
I mean,
anyway.
it wasn't conscious. I mean, it's just sort of a reflection of how I think about these things. But
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about that. I
nice.
haven't thought about my early money memories much, but my parents were both school teachers when I was growing up, but we lived on the campus of a boarding school. My dad ran one of the boarding houses. So I went to that school, and my parents were school teachers. Like, we weren't
Yeah.
super wealthy by any means, but the tuition to attend that school was about $40,000 a year. I think it's more now. And so
Wow.
the people the people that I was surrounded by were quite wealthy. That made for a pretty interesting dynamic. Growing up
Did
around a lot
that,
of money.
yeah, I'm like, I wonder, did that influence you being like, I want to learn how to get money because I'm surrounded by it. And now I want to kind of, or I don't know, like that definitely had an impact, I'm sure.
I don't know. I didn't come into this career for any particular reason. I just kind of ended up here. So I don't know.
You just ended up here. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Story for another day, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm
Can
not your
you
therapist. We don't have to go deep. We don't have to.
can you take us through the first money memories exercise or a brief version of it?
Gosh, yeah, I actually have my book here because I'm like, you know what? What was that exercise I wrote 2 years ago? Let's see what's going on here. Okay, let's bring it up in this chapter here. And this is it. First money memories. Okay. So I'm not going to read it all out, but just to give you kind of an idea. So the first kind of component of this exercise is really, and Dan, this would be helpful for you, to help you elicit a memory, just any memory, including what you had for dinner last night. And so there's a couple, it's really like, get grounded, start kind of just doing some breathing exercises just so you can kind of get back into the present moment because our minds are always here, there, and everywhere. And so really just practicing with your breaths to elicit a memory. And then once you've been able to do that and you're in that kind of mindset, then you can start kind of going a little bit further back or way further back, depending on how old your first money memory is, and really thinking, okay, what is that memory? And honestly, usually there's something that kind of pops up. And then asking yourself for some more details about that memory. So, where were you? Who were you with? How old were you? How did you feel in that moment? And then when you have some of those information, those details, and you can kind of visualize it and see it, then ask yourself, what is your current interpretation of that memory? And the tricky thing with memories is, again, like I told my mom, she's like, what? I don't remember any of that happening. It's It's my memory. It was my interpretation of it back then, and it's my interpretation of it now. Doesn't mean it's necessarily completely accurate. Again, I was a child, but there's these feelings that are ingrained in me that are still there from that moment. So don't judge the memory or be critical about it. It's really just about noting everything down so we can be like, oh, maybe this has some information that will provide me further information about why I feel a certain way about money today. So that's really all it is.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about. Okay, can you also briefly talk about the feeling about money today exercise?
Yeah, so that's really, and let me just open back my book just to go through it with you guys, be more the most accurate I can be. Okay, shouldn't have closed that page. Okay, you're feeling fine. Okay, so this is now taking a view of how do that feeling from the first money memory, or just any kind of feeling, again, no judgment on what you're feeling, your feelings are your feelings, about how they may come up when you are dealing with money in any kind of capacity. And it could be, opening your wallet at the grocery store, and getting your credit card out or getting cash. How do you feel on payday? Excited, or like, oh gosh, another month, how am I going to make it stretch? How do you feel when it's time to pay some of your bills and you actually have to do that action of paying your bill? Do you feel, all right, I'm excited, we're paying that bill? Or do you feel like, oh my gosh, it's going to drain my bank account? How do you feel when you buy a lottery ticket? Are you buying a dream, or is this just like a fun activity? Or do you have a lot staked on that? How do you feel when you're buying a gift for someone? Do you feel obligated, or do you feel, happy to do it? How do you feel about any kind of action to do with money? And I think none of us have probably asked ourselves any of those questions. How do you feel when you're interacting with money in this way or that way? And are the feelings overall positive or negative? And it could be a mixture, especially if, we've never really thought about this before, but it's just a good way to be like, where are we at with our money right now? And that, if you go through the exercise and kind of write these thoughts down, it will reveal a lot about some things that are like subconscious that you've never actually thought about openly and clearly before.
It's so interesting to talk about that, like this feeling about money today, because I would say that one of the things I've learned working with clients over the years is people feel very differently about spending money. And it's
Yeah.
not that closely related to how much money they have.
Hmm.
So there are people who find the idea of spending money so stressful
Yeah.
that even if they spend it on something that you would think they would genuinely enjoy, they resist it.
Yeah.
And there are other people who have no qualms whatsoever about spending money. And of course, as long as they have enough,
Yeah.
that's not an issue. The problem is when
Hmm.
you have the mismatch between people who love spending money so much that they don't have any left.
Yeah.
Um, but one of the things I know I've always tried to talk to, especially retired clients, when they start drawing down and spending their savings,
Yeah.
it's like you need to understand right now what kind of spending makes you happy and what kind of
Hmm.
spending leaves you feeling regret after.
Yeah.
And some people are very good at articulating that, and other people never even really thought about it. And I said, like,
Mm.
believe me, like I'll give you a good example that comes up a lot. Working with a client who has plenty of money and they like to travel. And I might say to them, the budget is there. Like, instead of flying a coach, you may want to upgrade to business class for your next
Hmm.
trip. Some people will just think of that. There's no way I'm ever going to do that. It's a
Yeah.
huge waste of money. And I'm not the type of person who flies business class.
Mm.
And I don't know what makes them feel like that. It might just feel like I want to take that money and spend it on something
Yeah.
else, which is fine. But it's more like, no, I won't spend it at all. And I'm not going to take it out of my portfolio in
Yeah.
order to, spend a little bit more on the trip. So that's a person who's at least self-aware enough to say, I don't get any enjoyment out of that.
Yeah. I
You
don't
know?
value a first class or business class seat. I
Yeah.
value other things. But
Yeah. But
I like that how you mentioned like even the thought of, but I'm not the type of person that would, and it's like, I'm like, oh yeah, I completely get, like, not only do I not value that kind of travel, I'd prefer to go, but then if I do coach instead of business class, I can go on 2 flights instead of one. But also it's just like, don't think I'd feel comfortable personally being with all these other people who spend money in a very different way, or maybe they're in a different income bracket. And there's also that level of personal comfort. Like, I don't think I'd feel comfortable being with these types of people because I don't think I'm part of them. So what if they judge me or whatever the case?
Yeah, it's very much
So many
tied up with
feelings.
your identity, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes.
Kind of related to that, Jessica, what do you think, or how does someone understanding their own money story help them make better financial decisions?
I mean, I think that is the only thing that will help you make better financial decisions is understanding where you're coming from and what your
Mm.
relationship with money is, and the narrative you've been telling yourself about you and money up until this point. And again, the reason I wrote this book is most of us have never thought about it in depth like that before. And until you really do, then you can start really connecting some dots between your feelings, your behaviors, your dreams that maybe you're not able to achieve and you don't know why. If you're able to understand, well, this is why, here's the full picture, here's what happened, A, B, C, D, then you can kind of take a step back to see where things maybe went wrong, or what route you took to get to where you were, instead of like, oh, there's such an obvious route I should have taken that I didn't because I was very much in it. If you can kind of take a step back and really take a look at everything that's happened and transpired over the past several years or decades, it will make it a lot easier. Just like when I, work with a client and they don't understand why there's never any money left over to save. And then we take a look at their spending. I'm like, well, the data is there. It's showing us a very clear story of where you were emotionally, behaviorally, and you don't even remember some of these expenses because likely you were, maybe you had a bad day at work. And so you went to this store and got something and it's in your closet and you've never even worn it and you totally forgot you bought it. It's like that will, the evidence is there. And so we need to do the same thing just for the the big things and even some of the small things that have happened with us and our money to get us to where we are. So then we can, okay, well, we don't want to do that again, or we're going to keep that. That really worked. We want to, fit all the pieces that, what do we need to add in so we can move forward with some different action steps. And, I don't just tell people do this. This is something I do every single day now, to not repeat the past, to add some new things and keep some of that. There's always going to be some stuff that is working for you. And remember and hold on to those as your anchor. These are working. They've served me well. Let's keep doing it. And we just want to, just try a different recipe because the old recipe is just not working anymore.
What are some of the common money lessons that people should probably unlearn?
Oh gosh. I mean, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a whole chapter on lessons we learned. And most of the lessons we learned about money are usually indirect. They're not like, most of us were never sat down. I certainly wasn't, to be like, this is what you should do with your money from your parents growing up. It's usually what we observed or things we heard when our parents didn't know what we were listening, but they were talking about the finances. And a lot of that stuff, that those were our parents' issues with money, but we adopt them and now they're our problems, but they're not our problems. We're just carrying someone else's problems. And they may have already worked through it. It's not even, they're like, oh, I don't even do that anymore. I'm like, well, I still do. And so, one thing that there's a big chapter on generational trauma. And really, it was just to take a look at where are you at with your money and has your parents experienced that, your grandparents. And for me, a big thing in my really on my mom's side of the family, there's always been, extreme frugality and a lot of fear and anxiety around money, not having enough. And when I started looking at the family tree, and then I did an interview with my grandpa years ago for the podcast that I then was luckily able to use for the book that really helped me do some research about my family history. Long line of poverty. And that really stays with you and gets transferred to the next generation, where even though in my generation, in my family, we are the best, the most well off compared to anyone down my family line, but I still carry some of the lessons I learned from my grandpa and my mom about how to be smart with money. And a lot of it was be a really good saver, live below your means. Those are really great things. But they were also very resistant to investing in things that were unsafe and taking any kind of risks. So like real estate investing, absolutely not, but buy your home, pay it off as soon as possible. Oh, work at a startup, take a chance on this potential, opportunity that can, accelerate your career? Absolutely not. Find a job and stay there for 40 years. And so those are things that worked for them because they helped them survive. But I've had to unlearn a lot of things that they were just trying to help me stay safe. But actually, they were actually the opposite. They didn't make me more safe. If I stayed with the first job I got out of university, I'd be out of a job because it went bankrupt. So there's a lot of things I had to unlearn that were not helpful, such as, yeah, playing it too safe. That's actually sometimes the most dangerous thing that you can do. You need to be adaptable and try new things and take risks.
Yeah, those are good lessons to unlearn. What are some of the most harmful, I think in the book you use the word toxic money behaviors that you see?
Oh gosh, I'd say having a really poor view of wealth, and this might be something that I want to explore further, maybe in a future book, but I talked to so many people that had a very negative, like they either thought that they could never achieve wealth because it was never achieved in any environment in their family. No generation had ever had wealth, so how could I possibly get that? That's also something that I have been working through as well. But also the kind of envy we have for people who do have more, and I get it. There's such a big divide right now, like never before, where the rich have never been richer, and there's so much poverty, and there was a very small middle class. And so, a lot of people hate the idea of wealth and people who have, riches, and sometimes in their mind, the only way that they'd ever be able to achieve that is to do something incredibly risky to get rich overnight. So just like pick that perfect stock or the crypto thing or whatever, instead of the boring, slow path to wealth. And so that's a really toxic behavior of basically hating people who have money when you want it at the same time. And your biggest dream is to have wealth. That's very conflicting. How are you going to be able to achieve that goal when if you do achieve that goal, what the end result is you hating yourself because now you're in that class of people that you hate? That's not healthy.
Yeah, the comment about the lottery seeking behavior is really interesting. I did a video a while
Yes.
ago on why index funds make sense. Like nothing
Which I love
revolutionary.
those videos because I'm an index investor. I'm like, yes, Ben, yes.
And a bunch of the comments were people saying that like, yeah, that's great, but I don't have enough money to invest in index funds, so I need
Or
to
I
go
don't have
invest
time
in.
to wait.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That's another one. And so I'm going to
Mhm.
go invest in meme coins instead.
Oh, does that just break your heart when you hear that?
It
Like,
does.
please
It does.
don't. No. Oh my gosh. Oh yeah, it's scary out
You
there.
Jessica, you talk a lot in the book about trauma and the
Mhm.
role that that can play in our relationship to money. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I thought that was my favorite part of researching the book and writing the book because I knew not too many books out there really talk about the interconnection between money and trauma. And most people are like, I don't see a connection at all. The thing is, trauma, and it can have nothing to do with money or your trauma. It could be like you survived a natural disaster and that has impacted you for the rest of your life. That will impact all areas of your life when it comes to like your romantic relationships, your friendships, your career, and your money. Because whenever you feel triggered from that trauma, which can happen so easily based off of like a word, a smell, seeing someone's face, whatever the case, it will impact how you feel and your autonomic nervous system, and could potentially push you into fight or flight or freeze and fawn, which are the danger zones when it comes to our money. We never want to be in any of those spaces with our money because we're going to do something that we're going to regret later, such as sell off all of our investments because we think the world is ending, or buy a bunch of meme coins because we think this is the only way that we'll be able to build wealth and save for retirement. And it's like, no, don't do that. And so until you really understand yourself, your trauma that could be experienced or witnessed or inherited through your ancestors, which is really interesting. A lot of us have inherited trauma that we're carrying and we didn't even know we had it. Until you really break that down and understand it, you may not understand some of your behaviors with money, your actions. So a lot of the people that are very common than when I work with, they have a shopping problem, they spend too much, they don't know why. And it's not that they're spending oh, I just spent so much money on groceries. No, it's usually something that's material that's not an essential, and it's something to get a dopamine hit. They want that
Mm.
dopamine hit because something happened at work or in their life that they felt bad and they were in that, fight or flight, freeze fawn, and they needed something to get out back into that place of safety and connection. Buying something was a really easy way to temporarily alleviate that kind of pain. But then they have to keep doing it to get that dopamine, and they're never really figuring out what is the root cause of this pain. And so unless you understand the root cause, you're going to keep that behavior and get into further debt or drain your savings and never make any progress. So it's really just better understanding, why are you doing the things you're doing? It's probably not just because you're bad with money. Like, I don't believe anyone's bad with money. I don't like that saying at all. It's probably because something else is making you feel a certain way and you did a certain action to feel better.
I don't want this question to come across as judgmental, but you do comment on it briefly in the book.
Yeah.
What do you think about trauma just being an excuse for bad behavior?
So yeah, I say I understand where people can come from and label it as like, well, that's just an excuse. It's not an excuse, it's an explanation. An excuse means, well, that's just how I am and I'm not going to change. I've got trauma. I'm an overspender. It is what it is. Yeah, that's not good. We don't want to be in that space, but we do want an explanation for, well, why am I doing this? Because then once you have that explanation and that added information, then it's very clear on, oh, this is what I need to do differently in order to get a different outcome. So it's never, an excuse is never what we want. We want an explanation. We need that extra information so we can move forward. But yeah, I feel like that's always a cop-out when people are like, oh, that's an excuse. You're like, oh, you have to read my book. You have to do a lot of self-work, like if anyone feels like, oh no, I don't have trauma and that's an excuse, I guarantee it's because you have not really delved into your own situation and really did some introspection and honestly probably shown yourself some empathy. Maybe you're just like too closed up because of things that have happened to you. You're like, I can't even go there. And so my shield, my protective mode is to just, blame other people. You're like, you're in this, we've all probably been in that situation once or twice. And I definitely was at a certain point in my life. And it's just not it's not a healthy place to be in. We need to, again, go back to that point of, we need to show people empathy, and we may not fully understand why people are the way they are. Why don't they just do this? It's this, solution is so simple. And sometimes I feel like that with people, but you're not in their shoes. You don't feel how they feel. You don't have the same lived experience. So you'll never fully know, but you have to allow them the space to get to know their situation so they can improve.
You mentioned really enjoying the trauma research for the book. How did learning more about trauma change the way that you approach your counseling practice?
I know that sounds weird that I loved the part on trauma, but it was so fascinating because even though I'd personally been doing therapy for years, we never talked about trauma or, childhood or anything like that. It wasn't until I started doing research for the book, did a bunch of sessions with a couple different therapists who were trauma trained in a couple different areas of therapy, that I started understanding more about myself that I never uncovered during some other therapy sessions. And what I realized is that most of us have some form of trauma. We've been touched by trauma in some way. And because of that, we, will act in certain ways. And so it just, for me, again, it was like, oh, that's why I feel like that when I see this or hear this, or I'm in this location or something like that. And so for me, it really helped me better understand me and my relationship with money. And so having this information now, when I approach working with a client, honestly, now I feel like I see trauma everywhere. So if I'm watching a reality show or talking to someone, I'm like, trauma, because often that's kind of where things, start, or why someone's doing a certain thing that you're like, that doesn't make sense. Oh, maybe it's a trauma response. And so for me now, I'm more aware and kind of, I can pick up on some cues. And when we're in that situation, then I'm in a better position to kind of say, hey, have you thought about therapy? Because this might be the missing element. Again, a lot of people seek out the help from a financial professional because they think it's a money issue. That's their only issue. But likely, again, if you're a trauma informed, facilitator, then you can pick up on those cues and be like, you know what, there is a money issue, but I think there's some other issues that are impacting your money. It might be a great thing to also see a mental health professional to kind of deal with some of those things. And that'll kind of free you up to be more receptive to some of this boring traditional financial advice that does work. Like, know where your income is and your spending, and have a plan, and check your net worth, and invest strategically, and all this stuff. Because at the end of the day, and you guys know this, you've been in the field for so long, money is pretty simple and straightforward. So why are people struggling with it? Why are so many Canadians having the hardest time in the world with money? It's because, the whole point of my book, there's other things going on in the way. It's not just money. It's everything but money.
It's everything and money, I
Ooh,
think is,
everything and money. Oh, I
yeah.
like that too. Yes.
It's interesting because I think, any advisor who kind of pays attention and listens to their clients knows that there is very often some personal background that is affecting the way they make decisions. But at what point does it become inappropriate to ask personal questions, when you're in an advisor-client relationship? I mean, there's a line between being sensitive and overstepping the bounds of the relationship. I know it's a line I've had to walk a number of times. I don't know how you feel about kind of where is that line?
You can definitely, I mean, when you are practicing, active listening and picking up on those cues, the physical, and also just the words they're using, and just like their tone, or, oh, they're kind of short with that answer. Maybe they're uncomfortable at this point. So really being able to kind of listen in those different ways to see where they're at. And usually there's a natural point like, okay, I think we're at the limit. And also just, yeah, asking them outright, like, sorry, if this is too much, please let me know, and giving them that opening to be like, yeah, that's a little bit, personal, so I don't want to go down there. And also recognizing at what point have you kind of exceeded your limit as that either financial counselor or that advisor, and you're like, okay, this is not, I'm not a therapist, and I never try to be one. I always just try to gather information to find out more about what direction are we going into. Are the problems that they presented at the beginning of our session actually the problems? And do they need someone beyond me to help them with some of their other issues? So really it's, yeah, again, it always goes back to listening. And often I don't even ask a lot of personal questions. I usually start with one question and just kind of let them talk, kind of like a good interview. You just shut up and just listen, and they just keep going and going. Like for all the interviews I did for my book, these real people from my audience, and I selected a bunch of them. I asked 2-3 questions and we talked for an hour. They just kept on talking, or I'd be like, tell me more. Let's unpack that, or something like that. And then they reveal how much they're comfortable in revealing.
Yeah, I think in that high trust kind of setting where they're talking to you and they're from your audience, or if Dan or I are talking to a client, in that type of high trust setting, people they'll just talk.
Yeah.
You don't have
And
to ask
usually
many
they never
questions.
had that opportunity to talk. Because again,
Yeah.
a lot of, financial professionals do a lot of talking and not enough listening. And so when you can build a relationship with a client where you have that trust, and a lot of that is based off of you just listening, they're so thankful because they're like, oh, finally, I have a space and someone's listening to me. This is great.
Yeah. What do you coach people to focus on first? Mental health or building a solid financial foundation?
It depends on the client. If it's really clear at the forefront, oh, there are some, mental health issues that are more important, that's where we kind of want to start. On the other side, and I write about this in my book, I understand that seeing a therapist or a counselor or what have you costs money. Most of us don't have insurance that covers that. Some do, and then like take full advantage, but a lot of us don't. And so we do unfortunately have to do the money component so we can find that cash flow to afford those therapy sessions. And I've done that with a number of people as well, because therapy session could be between 150, $250 a pop for an hour. And so some people have to make these decisions like, well, this is actually really important. So we have to take a look at their spending and their income, and we have to hit pause. I always like to say hit pause on things instead of cancel things or cross things out, or cut things, because no one likes those terms. And I get it. Let's just hit pause and we can resume it later once maybe we don't need to do as many therapy sessions anymore. So unfortunately, we do have to kind of look at the numbers, but I think they're really motivated to maybe stick with that budget because they know what they're getting by doing that. We're going to help you in so many big ways by freeing up this cash flow so you can do these sessions. And then when you do those sessions, you're going to do a lot of work and it's going to be a lot easier going back to the numbers, because you're like, oh, okay, I don't have all these hangups, or I better understand why I had these hangups and why I was acting in a certain way with my money. Now it's a lot more clear, and I don't even want to do those things anymore.
I guess we're looking at sort of intergenerational experiences. Like
Mm,
if your family grew up either poor
yeah.
or wealthy, your experience is a little bit different. Or
Yes.
how does kind of growing up in those two different environments affect your own relationship with money?
Oh, yeah. The environment that you grew up in and how money was presented will have the biggest impact on you as an adult. And, I kind of break it into kind of two categories in the book, in that most people will either repeat or rebel against their upbringing. A lot of people repeat. That's kind of the prominent behavior I would see, is they're just continuing, sometimes trying to finish what their parents started. And sometimes that really does not work, because maybe what their parents were doing, it didn't work because it just wasn't a good strategy. It wasn't a good path anyway. And that's why, they were in their situation. And then some people may have felt really restricted, or, even if you came from wealth, maybe you really hated some of the things that it encompassed it, and so you wanna rebel and give away all your possessions and just live on the road and be a nomad, because you wanna reject it because you did not like it. And so when I was interviewing a bunch of people for the book, it was interesting to pick up on, oh, who's repeating and who's rebelling. And there's, one story I share in the book about this woman, Anya, who had a very similar background to this other woman in the book, that came from, immigrant families, and, a lot of poverty, a lot of restriction. One of them continued what her parents did and lived extremely frugally to a fault. Anya rebelled against that. And so she's like, I don't want to be restricted. I felt like I had no freedom. I want to spend freely. And then, unfortunately, because of that, she realized there's some repercussions. You're going to overspend. Now I'm in credit card debt. Maybe it's not about going to an extreme, it's about finding that balance. And so, what I talk about in the book is, even though that's our natural inclination to either repeat or rebel, we never really want to go to an extreme, but we think that that's what we have to do. We have to do exactly what our parents did, because maybe I think they knew best, or I don't think they did know best, and I want to do the exact opposite. But really, typically, the best course of action is to create your own path and find some balance. Again, keep the things that you think are good and useful, reject the things that are not working, did not work for your parents, and you can see it clearly now, and move forward, which is very difficult to do. I was very much a repeater, because, my mom was the money manager in our family. She was very good at it. But also there's other things that she didn't, because lack of, information, or, there was that fear around taking risks with her career or investing. And so I had to find a middle ground for myself in order to help me and my husband reach our goals, which was, even me just moving from growing up in Vancouver to Toronto. That was like a really big deal. My parents were like, "Are you crazy? That's the big city. Oh my gosh." And even people at work, I used to work in a newspaper, all the sales reps are like, "Are you kidding me? Going to the big smoke," as they called it. Uh, and they're like, "You're
Because
gonna be eating
Vancouver is
alive."
such a small city. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know, right? Like, and
So
also just like being on the West Coast, Toronto, Ontario just seems so crazy far away. It's so different. But I'm like, I think this is the right course of action. I could already see what my life is going to be if I stay in my hometown, and I can see the limitations in terms of my career and all these things. I think I have to do something and kind of rebel, and move to a different city and try it out here. And we've been here 12 or 13 years, and it's been very good for us. And we've been done really well by making this move, but it was the hardest thing to do something different than my parents would not have done. So, so difficult.
what are some of the best ways to spend money in ways that increase happiness?
Mm. Well, I'd say actually that was probably my favorite chapter to write after the trauma. Then I'm like, oh, let's go into something about happiness. It really comes down to, and I refer to this chapter often, because sometimes, especially when the news is so dark, I'm like, what actually is happiness again? How do I get my happy back? And in the book, there is an acronym called PERMA+. I'm not going to remember all of the acronyms at this moment, because I always forget, but basically it breaks down all of the things that give us long-term happiness. And most of them are free or very low cost. And we often, I think, don't put enough value on these things. We always think that more money will make us happy or the glitz and the glam. That's it's temporary. It'll make you happy for a minute, but not for a long time. Sometimes the happiest things that I've experienced are, having tea with a friend, doing a puzzle, reading a good book that's free from the library, like all these things that are so simple. Gardening, like there's all these things that are so simple that we discount, but actually they're the things scientifically that make us the most happy. And then also on the other part of it, I think most of us know at this point, but I have a big section in that chapter about, guess what? The data shows experiences make us more happy than material goods. But for whatever reason, I mean, I know there's the reasons, we still think that the material goods, once I get that thing, it will make me happy. It will for a minute. And then you're like, on to the next thing, got to buy something else, got to buy something else. So really I try to encourage people to, look inside themselves and say, what will actually make you happy? And also too, I think we're very influenced online about what makes other people potentially happy. We have no idea. There's so many people that I see online. I'm like, that is so fake, but they look so happy. And then the more you see it, you're like, well, maybe they are happy. Maybe I'd be happy if I also had that thing. But that's not, they're selling something. Someone's always selling something. So you've got to be really aware of when you're being influenced and really kind of shut out the noise and be like, wait, what actually makes me happy? And I think often we haven't asked ourselves that really important question for a long time.
PERMA is a positive emotion relationship, positive emotion engagement, relationships, meaning, accomplishment, and the only plus I know is vitality, which is like eating well and sleeping well.
Yeah. I think the plus is like, yeah, fitness, health, some other things I can't remember. I wrote this book, but it was a while ago.
Yeah.
But again, like those are very simple things. It's like get enough sleep, move your body, be engaged in an activity where you lose yourself. Like again, like a good book or gardening or something like that, having relationships. So one thing that I started doing that I never put enough importance, or I always like, no, I have too much work to do, or have this other thing that I think is more important to do, is that social aspect that we're in such a disconnected world, even though we're so connected at the same time. We need to be around people. The more times, even if you're an introvert like me, you still get so much pleasure and energy and joy from being around people and just learning about other people's lives and just being in their company. And I think often, especially because of COVID, oh my gosh, we were so disconnected. We've kind of forgotten how important just being around people is. It really is.
Yep. Yeah. Something that I've done I've been doing it for a while now. But I've got a friend that I meet up with every Thursday at the moment. It's been Wednesdays in the past, but we meet up, we go to the gym together, and we have dinner every week.
That's nice,
And
right?
it's awesome.
It's something you look forward to. You have a good time. Yep. Yeah, my husband just started doing it actually with a friend who doesn't live too far away. And it seems like every Thursday they meet up kind of halfway and go for a walk. I'm like, that's so nice. And it brings them a lot of happiness. You can download and just talk about whatever. And like for me, I'm part of 2 book clubs now. I don't know how that happened. Honestly, I rarely read the book. I don't have time to read all these books. And I started going to a gym that is really group workout classes. So we're all kind of doing the same thing. It brings me so much joy. And I've made a lot of friends, going to this gym as opposed to going to a regular gym where you're just doing your own isolated thing. And I never liked doing that. But I realized, I'm really happy when I'm around people, especially since I work from home alone. So I need to be around people.
How can people approach rewriting their own money stories?
That's kind of the fun part, is when you've done that deconstruction on your money story, the narrative you've been telling yourself up until now, the origin story, where it all started, how trauma and all these other elements have affected you, and the lessons you've learned that you need to unlearn. Once you've unpacked all of that, then you've got the really exciting job of figuring out, where do I want to go from here? I'm not super happy where I'm at right now. A lot of things I want to change. where would I like to go? Who do I want to be? And hopefully too, after you've done all of that unpacking, you'll realize the answer isn't, well, I want this amount of money and I want all of these things. You'll realize, oh, actually, I was running towards those things and they were just a band-aid for the things that I really needed to look into. And so you need to ask yourself, yeah, some questions that like, who am I? Again, what do I like? What actually makes me happy? What are some of my goals that I do know, again, will provide not only important things like safety and connection and security and things like that, but also that will bring me that long-term joy and happiness. And so really getting kind of back to your roots of what do I want? Because I feel like we did a lot of that introspection, in university or in our 20s, who am I? And then you just, start working and you've got responsibilities and life is hard throughout your late 20s and 30s and onwards. And we don't really take a moment to think, whoa, 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 what am I doing? We're just on autopilot. And so taking that time to really discover, what do I want? What do I really want? And then you can start slowly connecting that to your actual financial situation. And you can kind of see what's lining up, what's not. Do I need to earn more money? Do I need to, hit pause on some things? Do I need to restructure some things? What are some, blind spots that I've didn't even see and now they're so clear? What are some behaviors that I always lean into at certain parts of the year or certain, times that I feel this? And what can I do? What are some kind of systems I can put in place to prevent me from doing that again and again, because I never feel good after doing it. So really kind of restructuring everything. So when you kind of start your new journey, you're going to be on a better path and you have a much better guide.